Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can click a little link down below and you'll end up in Zoom. If you're in Zoom, click on the little link down below and you'll end up in Mukana. And there you really become part of our producer group. You are driving the show. You are deciding what we're going to talk about and even when we're going to talk about it. Your questions and your votes drive the whole conversation. We spend a little bit more time on the top of the hour talking about some of the most popular questions. By the end of the hour, we start going into kind of a speed round, and so we'll answer them, but not as quickly. So it's really important to vote on those questions and be part of that producer group and do your part as the producers. This isn't a place where everyone's just sitting around watching. You need to take part in the whole process. So anyway, we invite you to do that. If you think you can actually move from the producer group to the panelist group, just get here early. Raise your digital hand at 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we can do a mic check. We do this to make sure that we're really ready to look good and sound good before we go into the show. If you're not sure you're ready for that, you can come as early as 6 a.m. 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and come in. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff. We're just chit-chatting. In fact, we had a pre-show meeting in the middle of the first one. So there's a lot going on in there, but always feel free to interrupt us if you're trying to check your system before the mic checks so we can get that out of the way. First hour is general discussion. It's just what you want, anything you want to talk about in the area of media production or virtual production. The second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. So today we're going to be talking about cloud production, specifically with our little project, Mad in the Kitchen, that we're doing with Sky and Madeline Smithberg. We're trying to imagine how we would do this. Right now we're doing it all in hardware in my office, but how would we put this all in the cloud? And so we're going to have that discussion in the second hour and just brainstorm in that area. So if you have questions about that, you can ask you can make sure to tag those questions. Don't just put second hour or type it in, but tag the question there. And a quick reminder as you ask questions that you can go into your own profile inside of Mukana and add a pronunciation guide. So you can, and my recommendation is go to a pronunciation website and paste it in and put it in there. But it makes Bill's job a lot easier to get your name and your location right if you put that in. So take a look at that. Tomorrow we have David Milan from Harvard University. He teaches CS50, which has gotten a lot of attention regarding virtual classrooms. And so we're going to be doing that in our education hour. Then Nick Justishin from Drexel University is going to be here to talk about metahumans. He's been doing a lot of work in that area. And so he and Rick Markley will be kind of tag teaming and talking about that process. And then remember that at 5 o'clock in the evening, we'll be doing Mad in the Kitchen. And this is really a huge experiment in production. And so we really encourage you to both register and jump into it, but also to take part in it, either as watching it or actually cooking. We put the recipe out in the email that went out this morning. So the recipe and the instructions are out there. So you can go get the stuff that you need. And Hosmuk's wife, Damyanti, is going to be our guest chef, and we all cooked with her before, so we're really excited to have it. I think it's going to be a great Saturday. Doors open at 4 o'clock, so you can get in early, chit-chat amongst yourselves before the show gets started, possibly see the drama of getting a live show off the ground if you're not careful. Basically, you get the opportunity to listen. You can be part of the cooking, but you can also jump into a breakout and listen to all the comms in all of its gritty detail of us running the actual show. And you can look at the multi-view that I'm looking at and so on and so forth. And then right after the show, we break out and start talking about what happened, what worked, what didn't work, what should we change, how should we improve it. So it's really a great experience as far as learning that process. So I highly recommend making the time to come and check it out. All right, let's jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
The con, please.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill.
Our first question this morning comes from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. And Rupert says, with built-in laptop cams being generally below par, what brands or models actually have the best or at least the least worst cameras?
Lenovo has the least worst, in my opinion. Like and I would call it least worst. It's not great, but it's better than Apple until this last one. So I think that the new iMacs right now are probably going to have the best cameras out there for a computer. It looks like Apple kind of went up a couple notches in that area. Hopefully we're going to see that. My guess is we're probably going to see hopefully new MacBook Pros in June. And so if that actually happens, then we should see more of those going out. outside of that, I would say that Apple's kind of middle to bottom of the road. Dell is at the bottom. Their webcams are horrible. And I'm not sure. Anyone else have any opinions about other built-in laptops? Go ahead, John.
Yes, I would say don't use the built-in. Spend $200 and get a Brio.
Yeah, we've definitely started to really circle around the Brios as a tool. That's what I'm using right now. Part of it is that being able to make fine adjustments and so on and so forth make a huge difference without having to move your chair and everything else. They are a little bit more expensive, but they're as far as weight, cost, class of content, they're probably still the best ones. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I've dealt with a lot of government-issued computers recently, and shift to a phone, shift to a tablet, see what they have on hand, and just compare, see what they have.
The real problem that we have with the tablet and the phone is that Zoom does not properly manage that, and they leave pillar boxes. So from a production perspective, we avoid them because we get the pillar box. All Zoom has to do is crop in, like everybody else. But for some reason, we assume it's some philosophical reason, because it wouldn't. Everyone else seems to have figured it out. They just need to scale to horizontal. So I'm not sure exactly what the reasoning is there, but it's really frustrating. Next question.
Perry Miller in Chapel Hill, Carolina says, will the panel make a case to purchase the newly introduced iPad Pro 12-inch with a willingness to suggest its practical and creative use?
I'm pretty excited about the screen. So I think that one of the things we're really looking at is a sidecar for Resolve. Just being able to look at an XDR screen and be able to play out videos to it to get a real sense of what it's going to look like in vision. Go ahead, John, and then George.
So my wife and I both use the 11 Pro, and I can't, for me personally, exactly what Alex said is the perfect use case for that machine. I can't see me upgrading to that machine yet.
Mm-hmm. You go ahead, George.
I think once we have an opportunity to test the OWC Thunderbolt 4 hub and see if it really can interact with an external device, it'll be I don't want to say game changer, but it'll be a big deal if we could bring multiple devices in.
Yep. Go ahead, Guy, and then Jeffrey.
Yeah, I have purchased all the 12.9s as they've come along, and the thing that I use it most for is just the daily activities. But where I find it on set the most helpful is if something fails with my main rig. I have Teradici running on this, and I can control my cloud instances over cellular. So this is my Hail Mary machine, and I use, the battery lasts like 10 hours. So compared to my MacBook 16, it's like 2 hours. So I can, have a backup and have that confidence. But then the pencil is the other big thing that I just love using.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeffrey, and then Bill.
Yeah, I don't personally have a use for the XDR, so I'm probably going to get the 11, but I'm also waiting to see what people are going to do, because it's going to be a mad rush to try and put Mac OS onto this thing and see if it can actually be done. And that'll be a big game changer as well.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was surprised. Originally, I thought iPad content consumption device is not very good for creating anything. That was back in my iPad Mini 4 days. As I got up to an iPad Pro, though, the addition of that Apple Pencil can be a game changer depending on what you're trying to do in terms of interacting with the screen. And I'm considering it more and more something, because the camera looks great and the interface is light and intuitive, and it packs so easily in something. And yeah, it's not a full screen laptop, even with the keyboards and things like that, but it's a pretty powerful little machine. I'm surprised at it.
I'm hoping that because it's got an M1 chip in there, that the larger one will be able to just be, at some point, we're able to open OS 10, Mac OS on it. And once that happens, I now have a touchscreen with a pencil with cellular that is that becomes my laptop. And that's the thing that I'm excited about. Go ahead, Courtney.
But if you put Mac OS on it, won't you lose the multi-touch? Doesn't it? Or do you just use the touch as a mouse interface?
Well, we don't know. June is a long way away, so we don't know what that would look like.
So taking a touch-oriented operating system and replacing it with a mouse,
and that might be the cost, but I would still be fine with that. Like I being able to have an iPad form factor with Mac OS would be, with just basic touch and drawing would be enough for me. That may not be enough for Apple to do. So who knows what they're going to do? They may decide that's not worth it. I don't really. I mean, the multi-touch is great, but I would be fine with just being able to run a Mac OS on my iPad with all the other things the iPad has, like lidar and cellular and a pen. All of those things together in one place would be a pretty big deal to me. Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, I'm wondering if now we have Thunderbolt on it, if you can get a capture device into it, that would be a really big game changer. That would give you a really powerful encoding device, onset device to just put anything in, including Instagram.
Yeah, and being able to take your video feeds and push them into, take the video feeds and basically push them into this as a display module for production would be super useful. Next question.
David Brady in New York says Zoom is scheduled to add an immersive view update to meetings and webinars on Monday. Will this be a game changer or a distraction? And he wants thoughts, and he has a link to Zoom's article.
Can you tell us anything about it, David? Or is he here? He was here earlier. Sorry. Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah, there he is. He's
David is here.
Mute. You just muted. There we go.
I am not sure what the it sounds like it's the same as the Teams virtual classroom auditorium type look. Haven't heard much more of it other than what was in that email.
Oh. Yeah, no, I'm not interested in it at all. So now I understand what it is. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, the Teams thing. Where's our dumpster fire GIF when I need it? It's terrible. It's total distraction. And also a resource hog.
And just remember that there was a lot of resources expended on producing this feature that is going to then ruin a whole bunch of meetings. All right, next question.
It comes from Jason Robertshaw in Sarasota, Florida, and he asks, is it okay to leave the ATEM running all the time? There doesn't seem to be an off or power button. Do folks just unplug them?
Go ahead, Sky.
Yes, that is again a traditional of at least what I was told, of the more professional equipment, and consequently, yes, there is not a power button. Now, I do turn mine off. I physically unplug it because it does get hot.
I turn mine off when it doesn't. There's a bug when it interacts with Zoom every once in a while where I get a gray screen. I turn it off then, but maybe once or twice a week. Go ahead, Chris, and then Chris Fenwick, and then Fritchie.
In the pre-show, I was right before the show, I asked if anybody knew why I couldn't get the webcam out of my Extreme. For the first time since I bought it, I actually left it on all night. And when somebody said that, I was like, oh, maybe I'll cycle the power. Cycle the power, the webcam output comes out of the Extreme now.
Yep. Weird. There you go. Yep. Chris?
Yeah, with the occasional thing like Alex mentioned, mine's been on for over 9 months. So
Yeah. So in production, it's pretty common to not have an on and off switch. They just build it designed to just shut it down when it loses power, and so it's actually designed to make that actually work. And you do that so you don't accidentally bump it and turn it off. That's what you don't want in production. So they take the on and off switch out. Next question.
And Tim Cooper has our next highest voted question, and it is from him in York, South Carolina. Any recommendations for a shotgun-style microphone that can be attached to an iPad and deployed to a school for recording and broadcasting to Facebook Live and Zoom? I need to purchase 5 of them to send off to 5 different schools, but can't break the bank, so we're looking for a modest cost.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So this is the IK Multimedia iMic version, their shotgun version, and it's a little bit over $100, but it's got some features on it. One is you can put a headset on it. You can also not use the iPad, put in a battery, and use it on a camera or something like that. And then, of course, it's got the volume and gain control on there, and a screw mount for putting it on like a Padcaster or something like that. Of course, when you use mics like this, the noise is going to be a little bit more roomy than a regular type of dynamic or lavalier microphone.
Yeah, almost every school activation that we've done, we use an SM58 and find a way to interface it with whatever device we're going to use. We tried shotguns like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that. And, a lot of schools, a lot of kids, a lot of moving parts, a lot of noise. And the chaos that oftentimes ensues is difficult to manage. It's also much more likely to get feedback. So if you've open speakers with a shotgun mic, you're much more likely to get some kind of feedback inside the system. The SM58 has been very successful. So an SM58 into something that'll do USB. So you have like a USB connection to your iPad. You then have a, it can be an X2U into something like that will do a much better job. We've mostly done it to computers, but you could do it in that pipeline. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and doing this is fun. So,
yeah, it is.
I have a question.
They're like reporters. They're like reporters. Yeah,
that's
exactly.
a great idea. Tell me more.
But
until they start using it like a gesture stick.
Yeah, but we find that to be much more successful in classrooms. You may have a different use case, but I would highly recommend at least thinking about it. Next question.
Jason Robertshaw is back from Sarasota, Florida with sea turtle researcher. One of them asked me if there is a night vision camera technology that works underwater. They want to follow the mothers and hatchlings as they move from the nest but disappear from infrared once they hit the water. And he notes the water quickly absorbs infrared and heat. Is there another affordable non-military technology for low light when submerged?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, the Sony A1, A7, whatever that whole low light thing, I did a test once upon a time where I went out in the mountains on a stormy night. There was no light anywhere, and putting it into ISO 10,000, 9,000 million, it was amazing how much in the presence of almost no light it absorbed. There are probably, not cheap, but good underwater housings for that class of camera. I know they always make them for the Sonys, and I'm pretty sure they would make them for this as well. So you might want to just check that path.
Yeah, thermal doesn't work as well, but there are a couple different options. A lot of the UAVs, the underwater autonomous vehicles, have a series of lights that can be somewhat useful as well, and they're kind of built for exactly what you want to do. So you can remote control them and have them follow along stuff underwater. We've used quite a few of them successfully, and you can take them down pretty far beyond that area. They're not going to see very far out in front of them. That is a challenge, but they are pretty useful, and they have some some low light capabilities. The camera with the non-military camera with the most light sensitivity is the Canon ME20. It's not cheap. It's 20 grand. So this isn't like, how do I put my webcam down there? But the ME20 has an ISO of over 4 million. And so we've literally shot things where we have a usable shot for an event, and we can't see anything in front of us. We can't even see the camera if the monitor's off. So it's one thing you may want to consider to some degree. It won't put light. You could put lights on it then after that, but it's super sensitive. So if you're just trying to figure out cost not looking at, or you can rent it, that might be something to test underwater. Next question.
Dave from Toronto says, Apple TV color correction is available on the existing hardware in tvOS 14.5, but I'm not clear if it's in its latest beta. Has anyone on the panel had a chance to test it?
I'm waiting for it to drop next week. I think that they said they're gonna put up the update that has it. I think it's a game changer. Like, I really think that being able to use your phone to color correct your TV, and what it's doing, I don't know what it's doing, but I'm going to guess that what it's doing is basically building a LUT for a lookup table for the Apple TV, so that it knows how it has to correct the video so that it comes out correctly on the monitor. It will not be as good as a Flanders. It will not be as good as many of the other LUT boxes and so on and so forth that are used, but it will probably make your TV at least 80-90% better than it was. Like, for most people just be able to put their phone up there and it will do what it needs to do, and then it will go boom, here's a much better image. Now, the key, by the way, from a business perspective, is it'll only be great for your Apple TV. If you've got a DVD player, or if you've got a Roku, or you've got the apps built into the TV, it doesn't help them at all. So it is definitely going to tie you into watching things on the Apple TV, which is probably a good business model for Apple. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, if you don't think it's a waste of time, can you briefly describe the workflow that they're intending to do with the phone and the Apple TV and the thing in the deal?
So I don't
For those of us who missed it,
I think we have to do it, and then they did it so quickly that I haven't. What it looks like it does.
What did they
is it puts up
allude
an
to?
image. It puts up an image on the screen for you to match your phone. You put your phone over top of that screen, and then what it does, my assumption is it shows a bunch of colors to the phone. The phone measures those colors and makes decisions about what they should be versus what they are, and then changes the way that the Apple TV sends it's like taking a chip chart, except it's going to do it all in light, and then it's going to make a decision about what's showing up versus it's how we calibrate monitors, is being able to have that loop of something I can control with something I can measure, and then it just ties that loop together, and it's going to again, it's not I don't want to sell it like I think it's going to change, going to make your Vizio into a Flanders, but it will definitely make a much better experience for the user, and it's going to be the closest we've ever seen to large numbers of people being able to get accurate colors. Back at Courtney.
Yeah, and a tip for everyone, if you're getting a new TV, or even if you have an existing TV, is put your cable box or your DVD player on and adjust the color on your TV's controls so that looks good to you before you calibrate it for your Apple TV. That way, because otherwise the changes that your Apple TV makes to make it look perfect may affect everything else. So,
well, no, it won't affect anything else, because it will. That's the thing, is that's the problem for everybody else, is it won't affect anything else, because it's not doing anything to the TV. So it's only when you turn on Apple TV will it look great. It's not changed when you make that correction. You're not doing anything to the TV. This is what Apple's done, and this is what LUT boxes do. It just side change the TV. I think that my guess is the best behavior will be to make the TV as flat as it can be. So if you go into settings, you're going to make it if you're going to commit to the Apple TV experience and not using something else, you will probably set the TV to its flattest tones and then let the Apple TV do its thing.
Yeah, my point was that to adjust the other one first, because if you make an adjustment to the TV later to make the cable box look better, then it's going to mess up your Apple
TV. You're right. You'd have to just do it again. And I think that anything the TV does that pushes the colors, it may not matter. It'll be interesting to see. I'm definitely going to experiment with it as soon as it comes out. I'm super excited. Next question.
Edgar Mohn from Berlin, Germany says, regarding investing in a 4 physical input system, Mimolive with Mac Mini or vMix with a desktop PC, what would be the panel's recommendations, pros, and cons? Mimolive seems even more versatile than vMix.
Go ahead, George.
For me, vMix gives me a more traditional A/B switcher from the world I'm used to. So I would say vMix in my case.
I think as Mickey would often say, it depends. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
The biggest problem right now is that Mimolive doesn't 100% work on an M1 Mac Mini, which is probably something that you'd want to get overall. So I would say not yet for the Mac Mini and Mimolive. If you're willing to go back to the Intel, it should be fine.
Yeah, and I think I wouldn't want to buy a new Mac that wasn't an M1, and Mimolive is not doing that yet. So I think we're kind of in an impasse at the moment. Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, one thing is that he wants 4 physical inputs. The problem right now with any of the Macs, except for the Mac Pro, is that you can't put the PCI cards in. You need to have an external enclosure. So if you have an external enclosure, you have to worry about its power supply. You have to worry about the Thunderbolt cables. So a little bit more delicate than having a proper PC case. If you want to take it out, you can put a rack case in and mount the PCI cards in as well. So you get more options that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Comes from James in Dublin, Ireland, and James says, "What is PL short for? Playout? Is it only audio related?" Note, thank you. A Mitchell's, I guess, put an answer in Mukana chat. So
thanks, A Mitchell's, but we'll explain it here too. PL is actually not part of comms. I mean, it is. We use it in comms, but it wasn't started there. It was actually in the country when you didn't have enough individual routes for every house out in the rural areas. They used to say, "You are on party line 2." When the party line 2 meant everybody along that road was on that party line, and so they had to kind of negotiate who was going to answer and call, and number of rings. So they would, if they needed to ring you, they would ring it 3 times, and that meant you should pick that up, as opposed to 2 times as your neighbor and 4 times as the other neighbor. And so you were a shared audio line because they couldn't have individual connections. And so what we use it for in comms is that it's a shared group of production. So it might be cameras, or it might be producers, or it might be audio. It's everyone that you want to talk to. And then a lot of times you have point-to-points, which you can talk to that person if you have a matrix. But especially when we got started, a lot of us would only have 1, 2, or 3 party lines in a production, analog party lines running along XLR cables to put that together. Go ahead, Bill.
And if you're in the camera department and you hear PL, that's a positive lock lens. It's one of the PL mounts is one of the typical camera lenses.
Not like we have lots of, there's
lots of acronyms
meetings
that are shared.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next question. Good point, Bill.
Keenan Campbell in Princeton, Illinois says, I'm planning a hybrid webinar with 3 presenters on location and 2 others from Zoom. We're going to use extreme ISO for the super source. I need to do 2 mix minus for the 2 remote presenters. Any ideas? I posted more info and a diagram. Ooh, that's nice. In Office Hours Discord under I Need Help.
There's a lot of things that should be able to do that mix minus. So it just depends on how much. Like an XR18 will actually, you could set up mix minuses. It just has to have enough buses. I mean, even an analog mixer that has 3 or 4 buses can do that mix minus, as needed. So it's a pretty straightforward process. I mean, I think that I'm not a big fan of analog mixers, so I would look at the XR18 and. Obviously, if I was going to buy one thing that I use over and over and over again, I'd probably think more of the X32. That's going to give you a lot more headroom for other events that you may produce. And since no one else is raising their hand, we'll keep moving.
Here's his diagram
ahead,
in case anybody wants to see the diagram.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I'm just wondering if he can think of his on location as one member of Zoom, because his Extreme is going to feed his local presenters into that. So that really is one person in a Zoom meeting. And then he has 2 others in the Zoom meeting who he can pin and get their video feed, but just take the audio from Zoom and let Zoom handle the mix minus. So he has basically local presenter into Zoom and then the return from Zoom. And that may simplify things for him in this, rather than trying to set up individual Zoom meetings with the 2 remote people and having to handle the mix minus himself.
I think that because my advice towards a heavier one is because I know who Keenan is. So I know that he could probably figure out the mix minus in separate Zooms. And the only thing that I would say is that, and I admit that I'm very addicted to not sharing people in Zoom, because once you start doing it, you can't go back. Like, you just look, once you start having individual Zoom connections and you're able to manage TalkBack, if you look at all the trouble there was some event that happened with the government yesterday or the day before or whatever, I don't know, it was a bunch of world leaders and Putin and everything else. That was a mess, and not having all those pieces together, the individual computers with the TalkBack and to everything else, creates this inability to manage a large scale event for it. So I would highly recommend, until Zoom figures out ways to do ISO audio in and out. Jeff is absolutely correct that it's a simpler process. I would argue that worth getting good at. And I will say that we're now, after very, very slow, we're buying these little B-links like little chiclets. So the B-links are pretty good at this by Courtney. So anyway, so they're working really well as small connection devices. Next question.
Eddie Martinez out of Palo Cedro, California says, anyone felt pressure from in-person events as different areas open up? I've had 2 projects cancel for in-person events as restrictions are relaxed.
You'll definitely see people wanting to go back to in-person. I mean, they're definitely going to want to do that for a while. So I don't think that it's going to be. I think that we're definitely, like, I think I grew it, I can't draw it, I'm in a hotel room, but I think we had nothing, very, very little online, then it spiked, and now it's dropping, but it's not going to drop back to 100%. It's going to drop back 60, 70%. But now this edge is going to keep going up. So you're definitely going to see in the next year or 2, and you're going to see forever physical events. People are going to want to do physical events. But I think that when these tools that have been charged with an enormous amount of money and energy, really mature, the largest events will be virtual. I think that's probably the trajectory. Go ahead, Scott and Bill.
I'm just observing my own Sunday morning people group, and I noticed that the numbers on YouTube were almost the same at about 90, and that the in-person that is there is about 12. And so that people want to return, but it is an older population, so they're very concerned about their health and loving into each other and being able to do it for a long time. So that's one report.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill, and then John.
So I had that shoot in Los Angeles the last week or so, and I think it's really a hodgepodge right now. There was COVID compliance most of the time, but you can see that the people on crew and staff, particularly on client side, who have been double vaccinated are starting to think less about it, and you're seeing those signals. They're not masking up as consistently as we were before. So I just think it's getting to be that transition period where nobody quite knows what to do. So do what you feel safe about.
Go ahead, John, and then Courtney.
So we had a meeting with the largest event planning company here in Las Vegas this week. These are old school guys. They still have their head in the stand. And they feel threatened by the virtual producers. And so we had to step back and tell them that to go the hybrid route right now to the place where they feel comfortable to move forward. I think virtual is just going to blow them out of the water, and I don't know how long it's going to take. But
I think that the irony is that if event companies really dug in and said we want to do digital first events that are, have productions in individual locations for each person or a small group of people, and then go out to many theaters or many locations all at the same time, the way that Monterey, for instance, is betting on, and other things, that is actually going to require more infrastructure than the physical event they were doing before, and larger teams and global teams and all the things that we're figuring out here. You're going to have to produce it where you've got 20 endpoints and you've got crews that are dispersed, and that's going to be and as that matures and as we get good at it, and I can't get into some of the discussions that I'm in, but there's a lot of discussions about turning existing infrastructure into either generation or receiving sites at an incredible scale. And so that's coming, and when that hits, it's going to be amazing. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think hybrid will be around for a while, and the very last type of event to come back will be banquets, where you get a large group of people that are eating, and that's the most indoors, and that's the most dangerous place for the CDC to sign off on, or for the local communities to sign off on. And a lot of times it's up to the local mayor or the local city council as to whether they're going to allow something like that until,
because they're not going to be able to get traction. That's the most likely outcome of what we're looking at right now. Next question.
Comes from our own Liberty White here in the panel in Atlanta. What would cause a Blackmagic 4K not to connect in Zoom via an Atem Pro? It worked yesterday and it's been buggy this morning.
Blackmagic 4K. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I've had intermittent issues with it not seeing it. Even though I leave my Atem Mini on a good little bit of the time, sometimes pulling the plug on it and just doing a hard reboot on it will solve connectivity issues that come up intermittently. So it's something that I don't feel hesitant to do, and that's kind of my first order of business, is just unplug it and hard reboot.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I've had HDMI cables go bad.
You always want to check the HDMI cable, always. Courtney?
Also move it from input 1 to input 2 or back, because input 1 is different than the other inputs, so that could be a handshake issue.
First question I ask when someone says I can't see my camera is, are you in input 1? And then I move over 1 and just see if it, humor me, just see if it works. And a lot of times it comes up. Next question. Go ahead, Liberty.
Yeah, it was just so weird. It worked perfectly yesterday, and I don't think I really moved anything. And I feel naked without my Blackmagic this morning.
So you had and is it the Blackmagic switcher doesn't see the camera?
Well, Zoom is not seeing it.
Oh, and is it? Zoom is not, well, but it's going through the Blackmagic switcher.
Yes.
So the Zoom is not seeing the switcher, not the it's not the camera. Are you looking at the multi-view? Is the camera showing up in the switcher?
I can double check and report back,
Okay.
but I'm going to try all three of those
So
solutions.
the other thing, if it's not seeing your switcher, is it seeing gray or black, or just not seeing it at all?
It's black. So it says Blackmagic, and
Okay.
then
So that is this classic bug that we have to unplug both the power and the USB-C to the computer, and then plug it back in. Try that and see if it works. That works for me. I do it maybe once or twice a week. It's that's a kind of a bug that we're seeing. We don't know why, but it's right. It'll happen right at the beginning of a meeting, right? Like it was working
Like today.
and then immediately it doesn't work. And what you have to do is unplug the ATEM switcher and the USB-C. I usually wait a second just to let it settle for a second, then I put it back in again, and then it works fine. And it'll pop right up. Yep. Next question.
John Gerard in Berkeley, California says, comment, the new iPad is impressive, but what is the difference between my 2020 iPad Pro's 2-lens plus LiDAR camera and the new iPad Pro's camera? I've tried copying a large amount of files from an SSD on my iPad Pro, and it errors every time. I cannot use a USB webcam. These are big issues. So, in general, comments on the new iPad, I guess.
It seems like I don't think the lenses, I don't know if the lenses have changed at all, or the LiDAR. So I don't think that those are new features, unless anyone knows differently than me. I'm not totally certain of the whole not being able to use the webcam or carrying files.
Here's the specs on Apple's site. It looks like it's the same, but did it say Smart HD R3 previously? Crystal lens cover, autofocus, pixels, lens correction.
Yeah, they may have incorporated more of the vision stuff into it, or being able to capture that. I'm not sure if that was in the last camera set, the last spec. But that's largely a software thing. Anyway, I don't know how much the camera. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to use the webcam. But sorry, not certain of where that would come from it. I do think your copying to SSDs would probably work better on the new one because of the M1. It's probably a whole entirely different architecture than what you had before. Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, for the copying thing, now it's got proper Thunderbolt, so you might get better speeds, but depends on how well iPadOS is managing multiple large amounts of files, which is something we have to see as well, especially with more data on it. For the USB webcam, that's similar to what we asked about, using an external capture device, UVC camera or an external capture device to be able to use that rather than the built-in cameras. So for some people, that would be needed to be able to use the iPad as a primary machine.
And if someone, Sky, if you can let Jeff Keithley in, that'd be great. Next question.
Brian Carpenter in Cleveland, Ohio says, is there a reset to the, no, I'm sorry, Alex appears to be traveling without his normal Heil microphone. His headworn looks like a countryman, but did he pack a mixpre? What's chain? You still sound clear.
Yeah, so my Rode kit is a mixpre with, and I believe I have noise assist on it. I have to look at it, but I'm pretty sure I have noise assist on it. And but that's what I use on the road. I have a countryman into a mixpre, and then that goes straight into the computer. So that's the audio pipeline, and that is my travel rig. It's a little smaller than the Heil, a little easier to pack. It actually packs into most of my kit, including my webcam and everything else, pack into this little guy here. So this little mic or whatever it was, I don't remember, electrosonic old bag, and so then a couple little small newer tripods that sit on the desk, and it all fits into my carry-on with all my clothes and everything else. So it's pretty compact. Next question.
Kyle Hammond, whose pronunciation guide wins an award for the cutest today, says, is there a reset to the ATEM Mini Pro? My input 1, 2, and 3 are not showing camera. Input 4 and HDMI out work. Wondering if there is a reset or do I need a full repair?
Seems unusual. I would take, the first thing I would do is restart, pull all the power out of it, put it back in, see if it changes. Then I would take the one camera that's working and I'd move it along the inputs to make sure it's not something on the far end cameras or the cables. So I would use that cable from that one and move it along those to make sure that it's actually the switcher. If that doesn't work, I'd probably call Blackmagic. Maybe something's off. I'd also turn it off and let it sit for a day and let it cool down just to see if heat might have affected it. But I would do those first things while it's hot to figure out whether there is a behavior there that you're seeing. Next question.
Jonas Dachel is back from Reutlingen, Germany. When launching a product, how do you do it? Pre-produced Keynote like Apple as a live stream, FAQ Live, or something else?
A lot of people do different things. I think that one of the most important things is my opinion, until someone raises their hand and has their own opinion, is that you want to make sure that you get as much information out and answer as many questions as fast as possible. Go ahead, Liberty.
So my concern was just what is the product, like how complex it is, because if from that perspective you want to pre-produce that so that, or not do a lot of run throughs. So just thinking about the audience and what you're actually showing them. And an FAQ or like doing a live Q&A after would always be great so that people can answer questions in real time.
Yep, absolutely. Bill?
Well, this is part of a marketing plan, and the people that I work with occasionally who do marketing plans say you always start with deciding who is the likely buyer, and that takes some time around a table to figure out what are the people. Do they have a particular kind of equipment? Are they in a particular class? Can I find them as opposed to broadcasting out to everybody in the world and assuming that they're just going to be a tiny version of that who could possibly respond? And then once you do those things, you really have to try to find the most efficient use of every hour or every dollar you spend to try to get to just the people who could react rather than just sending out the messages into the ether.
All right, the model that we used, that we've used for products is, number one, is you do a lot of content ahead of time, oftentimes for months, that targets that audience with just information that they're interested in. Not trying to sell them anything, not trying to just be useful, make sure that there's stuff that's building up there. Make sure that you have a ton of videos and, not printed, but web material that is going to cover the device. So they really understand how the device works and what it's going to do or product, whatever that is, service per device, with images, diagrams, so on and so forth, so that when people find out about it, they can they can make it work. Then I don't think, it depends on how big you are. A keynote is great if you have the money to do a keynote. I don't think a keynote is necessary for everyone, but getting the word out there that it's happened, and then to Liberty's point, a Q&A is key. And if you have something, especially if you're in this group and you have something you want to launch, you should talk to us, and then we'll do a Q&A as a second hour and try to help you get the word out for that. Or we'll set up a whole thing where you build a Raspberry Pi. All right, next question.
Comes from Charles Klein in New York City, our friend. And Charles says, good morning, ladies and gents. Do the panelists have any experience with Shift I/O? I'm currently working with 2 networks that have moved from media silo to Shift I/O. I personally love Frame I/O. Any thoughts?
So many IOs. Has anyone used Shift I/O? I'm not actually even familiar with it, I have to admit.
I just tried to do a search on it, and I'm not getting anything. I get Shift tools for video collaboration and content creation. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's a product. Oh, yeah, that is Shift I/O.
Mm-hmm.
We'll process your information in accordance with our privacy policy. Well, that's their privacy policy. Creative Fund. It looks like they're a pretty big operation. Who knows?
Yeah. Sorry, we don't have any experience. All right, next question.
John M. Gerard, Berkeley, California, says, I can only ask a question after the Mukana link is entered in chat. Any chance we can get the link closer to 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time?
The link doesn't change. So you can ask the question. We reset it sometime in the middle of the night. Chris usually resets it at some point, so I wouldn't ask questions before 5. But after 5, generally the Mukana, you can start asking questions as early as you'd like. So just save the link that you have. We're not putting up new ones. Next question.
George Kennedy Jr. in Washington, D.C., our friend here on the panel, says, Alex, follow up for clarification. What latency is normal from CDN to the viewer's player as bit rates are transcoded?
Well, so there's the latency of the transport, and then there's the buffer. So those are the two things that you have to. So you have to decide, and when we're building our own HLS or our own dash, we're making those decisions on our own. When you're cutting from regular latency to low latency to ultra low latency in YouTube, as an example, you're basically just cutting the buffer out. like we're going, and what you're doing is you're reducing the stability of the stream for the user. And so you just have to think about whether low latency matters, and so that's to me, there's real time, which is less than 400 milliseconds, and really less than 300 for me. And then there's, I don't care, like sometime under a minute, and so the 2.5 seconds or 4 seconds of latency means nothing to me. So like, it's just like a waste of time and waste of effort, so that's how I view it, because, I think low latency is because of bad comment management. When you merge comments with questions, you have to have low latency because you can't see anything. Once you separate those out, you have a lot of time. Go ahead, Jeff.
I think that there was a question. George and I actually discussed this a little bit offline too.
Mm-hmm.
But with some of the newer CDNs coming into the space, like Millicast, for instance, that's using WebRTC,
right?
That's been a big game changer. But I think it depends on the content. Like you said, if you have a good question system that can push in and out questions and get those to the panelists as fast as possible, that's one thing. But if they're standing on a stage 30 seconds that we used to think was like perfectly okay, 30 seconds is forever while they wait for a slideshow to be built up by specs and different content coming in. So I think it really depends on what the purpose of the content is, more so than just the technology itself. But our stuff in gaming is 3 to 4 seconds. And that's considered fast. I'm like, yeah, whatever. We could do faster, but it's not to the scale that they need it to.
Right. Go ahead, George.
So I'm glad I brought the question back up, and thanks, Jeff, for keeping me sane. So as we still continue to experiment with AWS, obviously I've already been using my own players, not necessarily my own player. I use a Theo player, but obviously when you start using your own player, you have to decide what bit rates you're going to use, whether you're going to go in just 3 bit rates or 4 or 5. So Alex, I would like to know, how many bit rates do you use, per stream or per player when you're doing your own?
We use generally, well, that's complex. So if on a single, it depends. Typically on a single ladder, my typical breakdown is 5. For some events, we've done as many as 9. And then when we have dual ladders, so like an HDR and an SDR ladder, then we have 2 sets, and then, so those are the, so you can end up with a lot of them. The number of stairs in the ladder shouldn't affect the latency. Like your encoder is going to, or your web thing is going to build it at the same speed, or it should if it's got enough horsepower. So that shouldn't affect it shouldn't increase or decrease the latency. Especially if you're doing it in AWS, it's not going to affect anything. It's going to punch it out as fast. It's going to punch those ladders out at the same rate if you have 30 or 1. It's not. That's not what's slowing it down. Yeah, go ahead, George.
So let me just add before we move on. I think for me, I've been looking at Harris Vision. They have a lot of white papers. I think it's a good idea to do some reading to see exactly what's going on with your transcoding. It helps a lot to really educate you on how your end users encode is being called up, or how your device is calling up that particular stream and so forth. So it's good for us to really get into how those things are being done.
Yeah, and that's more the player making that decision. The player is given a manifest, and you can look at how other people's manifest. By the way, just as a little note, if you're ever looking at a stream and you go, oh, I really like to look at it, open up your developer dialog box in Chrome, and you'll see usually something that is either an M3U8 or a JSON, and then you take that and put it into your browser and open it up, and you'll see if it's a JSON, you'll see the M3U8s. You grab the M3U8, throw it into the, just grab that link, put it in, it'll download the file. That is the manifest. Like that's what's being sent to that is an open thing. It'll show you what is being sent to the player. And then you can see how everyone structures, how they're structuring. I look at them all the time. I'm like, oh, I wonder how, this event is being structured inside of Akamai, and I'll just open up their manifest and I'll just go through it and look at it and go, oh, I didn't think of that. And I wonder why they're using this setting, and you learn from them. So you definitely can do that. Next question.
Jonas Natella is back from Reutling again. Unfortunately, it's a question for Mickey, who's not here today. A very rare non-appearance, but he wants to know how he records a multi-track of all Unity channels. So maybe somebody else can help.
Mickey just arrived. He might be available.
Yeah, so we'll let Mickey jump in and explain if he is here. I don't. Anyway, so but he can explain it. Go ahead, Jeff.
If it's Unity on a local implementation, it's Unity straight into the Dante Virtual Sound Card, and then track it off of something either on the machine, if the machine has enough beef, or on another machine that's just recording the Dante tracks.
I think this is not. I think he recorded it Mad in the Kitchen, all the comms as individual tracks, and he multi-tracked that, and that's from. So it's
each channel in Unity you can change.
Oh yeah,
what Dante output you want to use, and we frequently do that. I think that was Doug's probably solution too.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, we record our comms on individual tracks too. We use Personas's Studio One on a Mac. Believe it or not, guys, this PC guy does own a couple Macs. So, but yeah, Studio One is a great, software to do that.
Great. Now we're going to start speeding up. Next question.
Ranrod of Cookville, Tennessee says, can you add color spaces in motion following a tutorial? And they wanted me to change the color picker to Apple RGB color space, but the option wasn't available on my M1 Mac Mini.
It should be. When you click on the color, when you go into to click on the actual color, there should be a way to pop that open. You'll get a color picker, and then across the top, you should see selections there. I don't have a Mac Mini in front of me, but that should be something that you can change it's not really changing the color space, but it is changing the color picker. And so it should be when you click on that color, you'll see a basic one, but then across the top, you can usually choose. Next question.
Jeff Francis, Columbia, South Carolina. How would you tackle improving an overexposed video? I can share a still frame for reference if we want.
So is it, wow, yeah. And that's
someone handed me this video.
Yeah, yeah. You're going to want to try to. The first thing I would do is go into some kind of curves and just see if I can pull the gamma down and see how much data is there. There's some data that you may have lost. Those whites may be always white forever. They may not be able to grab onto. So I wouldn't pull the white point down because those make it look gray. But you might be able to grab on. This is just the first step I would take, is to grab onto the gamma and just pull that down and just see if there's something there. You might be able to change the way it gets there. That's the simplest approach. Of course, you can open up and resolve and start playing with mids and highs and so on and so forth. Just I wouldn't move the whites. So that's the only thing that I would probably avoid. Anyway, hopefully that helps. Go next question.
Okay, moving on. Lansing Pugh of Austin, Texas says, I have 3 different inexpensive pan tilt zoom cameras. I'd like to connect to my ATEM Mini. Is this possible? And he notes he has multiple PCs and Macs that he could use if that would help.
You can connect the video. You can't control them from the Mini, so you'll need to still control them externally, but the video will go in. So next question.
Brant Kruger of Minneapolis, Minnesota says, I feel like Alex mentioned recording comms from a show. Does he or do the panelists have recordings they'd be willing to share for students wanting to learn more about show calling?
The ones that we're recording right now, I mean, I don't know if Doug's willing to do that, but probably not. But we're going to do more shows like Mad in the Kitchen. We're going to be doing Mad in the Kitchen for the next 8 weeks. We're going to do more shows like that. And as we keep on going through that, we're going to be recording them. I'd probably wait until we had a good example of one before I just say, oh, we'll just grab that one, because we're also not doing it traditionally. One thing we are going to do before the end of Mad in the Kitchen is having somebody else calling the show, a director looking at it and calling the show. That's going to be a lot more valuable for you to hear. Right now, I'm just cutting between things, and you're not hearing the full comms. That I'm totally fine with. So go ahead, Bill.
If you want to hear examples of perfection in it, look up the name Hamish Hamilton on YouTube for some of his director calls of big shows. This is the top end. This is how it's done by the real serious players.
Right, but I think that inside of those are also not as representative of what we would do on a day-to-day basis, and so we hope to put some more of those up. And I'm going to get someone like Nate to okay him being recorded and then have him call the show, and I think that you'll be able to hear a pretty good recording, and we're working on that. We've been talking about it for years, so we're almost there now. With Unity has actually made it much easier in that process. Next question.
Chris Fritchie, here in the panel from Trumbull, Texas, says, can Alex add a used gear for sale room in Discord for those who are upgrading gear and for those who want to buy someone's previous gear? We've talked about this before.
I'm actually philosophically a little concerned about it, so that's why it's not there. It's not because we can't. It's that a great way to ruin a relationship is sell them your gear, and so I prefer to. It's just that I'm afraid that it could affect our community to have. I know that it makes sense to sell it, but it's not because anyone's doing anything wrong. It's because one person has an expectation of what they sold and another person has an expectation of what they bought, and I don't want to have it. I feel like that's a fissionable problem that could really get people upset. So that's why it's not there. It probably won't be anytime soon, just because I think I think I'd rather people just go to eBay, like and they can tell the other people that this is on eBay or whatever. But I don't. I'd really want it to be. It worries me. That's all. Next question.
Michael Vospian of Woodstock, Georgia is next with, I love this show and have learned so much from Alex and the very distinguished panel. Is it practical to expect this concept to grow in other fields absent a way to pay the panelists?
Well, we're starting to experiment with other things. So Saturdays are where we kind of experiment with that. We're doing cooking, very different from what we did here. And so we're experimenting with, like, where does this model and how does it apply to it? I think it absolutely could apply to other areas. What makes this one work is the fact that we have so many people that are interested in media, so that they've invested in that, and the style of this has worked out well. I do think it could work in other areas. I think it would be challenging, I think is the issue, and I think that, but we'll keep on playing with it. I think we may end up with seeds that grow into whole other groups, like cooking or gardening or other things like that. Bread. Next question.
Rupert McRae of Dallas, Texas says, any experiences with monitors with built-in webcams like the Dell P2418H Z 24-inch with a built-in, quote, full HD webcam in the bezel?
I've never seen a monitor with a built-in webcam that I wanted to use. I mean, I don't, maybe this one's better. I don't know, but every monitor, especially Dell does not invest heavily in USB cameras from my experience of Dell computers. They've been, I mean, we go through hundreds, and we've gone through about 6,000 people in the last 10 years, and the worst built-in webcams have been consistently Dell. So I mean, they've gotten better, but it's just not a thing that they spend a lot. It feels like it's not a thing they care about. So I don't know. This one might be different, but that hasn't been my experience. Next question.
Eric R. Price in Leavenworth, Kansas is up next with, can Alex expand on his comment yesterday about the OBS system should not be used with the M1 Mini?
OBS barely works on the Mac, from my perspective. Like, it's great on the PC because there's lots of gamers and there's a lot of people testing it and giving feedback and everything else. But on the Mac, it is really unstable. And that's the regular Mac. And now you're adding a new operating system that has new libraries and new things to it. That just seems like a recipe for disaster. Next question.
Jason Robertshaw of Sarasota says, I've used pixelfilmstudios.com for Final Cut Motion prepackaged title generators and theme packs. What are some good sources for text transitions or generator packages?
Motion VFX is really good. I have a lot of their stuff for packages for motion. They're amazing. Go ahead, Bill.
I don't use Pixel Film Studio stuff. There's a reason for that. I'm not going to expound on it here on the show, but a friend of ours had done some great packages in the early days, and they ended up where they shouldn't have been. So I'll just leave it at that.
So Motion VFX is a great one, and they produce a lot of those, a lot of really, really great templates. I would highly suggest looking at them. Next question.
George Sida, I'm sorry, currently using an iPhone with Iron webcam. That's IRIUN webcam app as my Zoom camera. Would like to try Filmic Pro. How can I get Zoom to see the iPhone camera using Filmic Pro, hardware or software?
I think Filmic Pro should do that, but they don't. So they don't act as a webcam. You were going to say, Liberty? Did you have your hand up? Oh, no. Don't ever go to an auction like that. All right, Beju.
Yeah, you can't use Filmic, but if you want to use the iPhone directly, Camo Pro is the best app for that. It gives you full control of the camera as well. Mm-hmm. You can try it for free, so try that.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there's also Cinemaker Meeting Director. It's a new app that's pretty cool, and you can actually run it wirelessly or wired. And the cool thing about that app is it'll do HDMI inputs too. So worth looking at, downloading, and testing out. There's a free 30-day to try out.
And I think we're talking about trying to get Cinemaker on here soon. So we'll have them come on and talk about it directly. Next question.
Liberty White here on the panel from Atlanta says, I'm working on an event that will mirror a fundraiser in Zoom where tables will be breakout rooms, over 500 guests, roughly 50 tables. What should we look out for as a potential issue or failure point?
Getting everybody into the rooms. Go ahead, Jeff.
50 tables. What was the total number? I'm sorry.
500.
Oh, that's it? Okay.
Yeah.
So one meeting will easily handle that. I'm working on one that's in the thousands, and we're going to be putting in like 50 meetings and then distributing it that way. So there's some failure points, of course, moving content around. Nothing that we haven't done before, but that's a bigger challenge. But just moving them around, 500 people should be a piece of cake. I would.
You just remember how long it takes to move people to a room, and just make sure you have enough people to do it relatively quickly, or make sure there's enough time to entertain them or something to entertain them while you're moving them into their rooms. If you already know what they are ahead of time, of course, you can pre-populate those breakout rooms with, so that can work as well. You might have web interface that sends them to they can't send them to the breakout room, but it can. But
Zoom OSC. Zoom OSC would be a
can,
perfect thing for this.
Yeah, Zoom OSC is a great example of something where you could just push everybody. At this moment, we're going to push everybody where they need to go, and you can keep on redefining that rather than using the Zoom infrastructure to make that work. So that that would be, I think Zoom OSC would be the easiest way to probably make that work. It just takes a little bit of work to get up to speed on that. Go ahead, Jesse, and then Chris.
Say also auto push people to the breakout rooms, and then maybe at least have one co-host dedicated to staying in the main session to get people that are just arriving over to breakouts, and then another person that can hop into breakouts if people have issues.
Go, Chris.
Yeah, the auto thing only works once at the beginning of a meeting. At least that's the way it was. It may have changed since then. Also, and for the entertainment thing, we did a thing once with John and Doug where we had a live cellist, and then just a lower third, explaining, please follow this link, go here, go to your breakout lane. It's fun.
Good guy.
Yeah, I would put the table name at the beginning of their name too. So rename everybody table. So like 1 in front, 2 in front, 3 in front. So that way it's really easy when you do the sort to push.
And that's something you either have to get them to do, or you can do it. Like, I think that Grant does it because he has them come through the web, and he populates their name on the way through. so that's the, and so that's a super efficient way to, to make that work. It is, I assume that you're having rigid, these are the people at these tables because they bought those tables. They want to interact with it. Yeah. And then the other thing to think about is you're putting all those people in all those breakouts. How are you getting the content, the plenary content, to all of them? So you have an announcement, you're going to do an event that they're all sitting around theoretically at that table. How are you getting the input, the video input, into all 50 of these rooms? And this is a AWS problem. This is not, this is not a physical, this is where my physical world disappears and Jeff's picks up speed, is that to get, video into 50 rooms is something that you need to do. I would do it in the cloud as opposed to trying to do it physically. Go ahead, Jeff.
I just was clicking through that too. It's like, yeah, if you send everybody out to breakout, they're just going to be staring at each other because they're not going to have any content going to them unless you had 50 other content pieces coming in. So you'd need 50 instances or 50 different feeds coming into that Zoom in each. So there'd be one per breakout room or one per table at that point.
Yeah, so you basically, and that's a great experience. Like if you can build it all but if you need to push out, 50 instances that are all going to go in and say hello. Here's my, here's what I'm doing there. And so it'll be interesting to see how that progresses. And then for us, what I do is then, of course, individualize all the speakers and all the things so that I can control all of that as that finished show that goes out to all of those pieces. So it's just something to think about there. I think we have one more question for the first hour, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, Joe Lovell of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania is in with, is Adobe Premiere Pro compatible yet with the M1 processor?
I don't know. Go ahead, George.
You could download a beta, but it's not fully compatible, but definitely beta.
There you go. All right. We are shifting gears, and it's very great to have Guy and Jeff. And where did Jeff go? Everything keeps moving around. All right. So it's one of the things that we're looking at is, Matt in the kitchen, we're building all of this stuff up right now in our facility, in 090's facility in San Rafael. And we have a specific way of doing it, and it has its advantages, and we're trying to work out a couple things on our end that it helps us do, which is why one of the reasons we took it on. And so we're working through that, but we know that it's a simple enough show in the grand scheme of things, and even as it grows in complexity, we want to figure out a way that we can get it into the cloud and then allow it to keep growing in complexity in the cloud early rather than later. So it's easier for us to piece it together when it's not too many moving parts. and then let it grow, keep on growing. So past the season 1, our goal is to actually get it out of our facility and into the cloud. And so what I thought would be useful, and afraid that I have a flight, so I will be leaving in about a half an hour, but I'm going to be here for the top half of the hour. We wanted to brainstorm how would we approach that, like, and really think about it as a group of how would we approach building this show in the cloud. So I'll let, before you ask questions as we start to go, we'll spend the next 10 minutes or so just brainstorming among the panel, starting with Jeff. Like, how would you approach something, looking at Mad in the Kitchen? How would you approach putting this in the cloud?
How many cameras were in use in the previous setups?
There is, at the host's side, I think there's four
Okay.
cameras, and there may be enough bandwidth to put all those cameras uploaded. I'd be a little concerned about it, of putting all cameras. That's the one thing that, the house now has, I think, 40 up, but it's so it may be able to put all 4 cameras up, but it wouldn't be. And again, we have to remember this is without a strong budget. So
sure.
And we also have Marisa, so we have currently
five
we got,
connections. Yeah.
But
So
those cameras currently, though, you were doing those via Zoom or something like that, so the bit rate is not going to be near as high.
There's two connections. There's one. There's a switcher on site that is doing the 4 cameras are getting switched. So there's only 2 connections going out right now. So there would need to be, if we took individual outputs from it, we would need 5.
Well, it definitely take individual. Yeah, ISO everything so that you're doing a true mix in the cloud. So first, Matrox, the 4 input sits here on my desk. I need to use it more, but it works really great. The Monarch Edge is this
Edmonds,
model.
Washington, 980. Okay.
All right, I'll get it on the way. That would be if you were doing hardline only. Sorry about my desk moving. If you're doing hardline only, then that would work out great. But if you needed to boost that a little bit more with some LTEs, with some wireless, to be able to bring in a little bit more bandwidth, then LiveView LU800 would give you 4 channels at that point too. So the other option is, and it is a very inexpensive option because you have a residence, order a second modem, order a second line. That's a super simple solution. And that we've done. I did that at my house because I didn't want my son, who's a gamer, heavy gamer, I didn't want him interrupting my Netflix anymore. So I didn't think it would be possible, but I asked Time Warner, and they're like, yeah, we'll take your money, no problem at all. Then it was the same, $45-50 or what it was. It was well worth it. And to this day, we still have 2 modems in that house, and our house is not huge. It's just better for us for an experience wise because of the limited upload. But that would give you more upload to be able to send those cameras up. Once you have the cameras and the audio up, the world's your oyster. You do whatever you want to at that point.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Ziply is also courting us, and Guy has Ziply up north. I don't know if we have it there in Bellevue or not, but that would be that way we'd have 2 separate providers as well. And options.
Yeah, and one thing that we've done when we don't have a Matrox, something to mux them all into one, is to make sure that we only see the person talking in one camera.
Yes.
So that's also why we try not to have like 2 different places the person can talk. And so we'll always say, hey, let's talk to one camera, because it means that any kind of small sync issues that are coming up from transport won't show up in the broadcast. So we can get multiple feeds from those individual ones. But beyond that, go ahead, Sky.
I just realized this was how we used to use StreamYard. We would have multiple cell phones being signed into, and then we would switch in the cloud. So there's a use case of that experience.
You could do that now. Matter of fact, I have some friends working on the NFL draft, and that's exactly where they're doing the whole cell phone route in some of those remote locations again. That's all SRT. And if we're not talking about we need that quickness,
Lyrics,
then it works. It's the Lyrics broadcaster on the phones. Yep. And especially with the new ones that came out, I'm salivating. It's time to upgrade.
Hey, go ahead, Bill.
Well, just because there's probably a couple hundred people watching this, I'm wondering if we're getting a little ahead of our skis for the general audience. But does everybody know exactly what the shape of Mad in the Kitchen is, what its goals are, what it's trying to do, and the infrastructure that everybody is now putting their attention to trying to increase?
Not die.
Yeah, and not fall apart. Does somebody have a
Well,
two paragraph overview?
We have right now we have Madeline in her house. We also, and she is the cook, the main cook, learning from another cook who is going to be the featured chef, and then. So those are the two that are talking most. Then we have 3 people that come in over Zoom that are able to have conversations. Well, they talk a little bit. They check in with them. That's going to become more and more interactive as we go forward. So we have 3 people coming in to cook. So that's the main show, and it's got some graphics and
so they're kind of learner cooks.
Yeah, they're learning with them
Okay.
to do that. And so and then you have Marisa, who is the social desk that basically she's interacting with comments and questions and process and everything else as we move forward. So that is the so there's a total of basically 6 people that are connected. Now that show, to make it more complicated, that show goes out to a Zoom. The show goes out to sorry, I lost train of thought there.
And their overall goal is to cook a recipe successfully over the course of this period of time. Is it an hour? Is it?
Yeah,
does
as
it
long
open?
as it takes, but an hour is what we're kind of shooting for, and have discussion. That show itself goes out to Zoom into on Zoom, and we're not on Zoom yet, but we're moving towards that. And so that goes out to Zoom, and then there's people cooking along there that aren't on the main show, and but able to watch it and do it themselves. Then there's a whole set of people that are just watching those people cooking. So it's and then we have another Zoom that's
so really you have
that's
like
not,
primary, secondary, tertiary, and a
There's a
4th group
whole
of
bunch of
audiences.
different-
You're trying to serve them all.
Oh yeah, and I think that there's the more we play with this, the more we're realizing that there's going to be we're going to end up building shows that show is generating 10, 20, 30 different permutations of that show. When people enter, we can see this coming. This is not for this discussion, but there's going to be a point where all of this blows up, and there's lots of people watching the show the way they want to watch it, which is a very interesting process, but it's not probably for this discussion. Go ahead, Scotty.
And philosophically, Bill, I do that. And so what is our purpose? And again, I'm pulling from my Graham Kerr experience, and that what did he give? And I think philosophically, what does a fun and delicious experience look like? And the word interactive is in there somewhere. But if you had a tagline, an elevator pitch, that's what I'm trying to deliver to everybody,
right? And so
all along the way.
And to simplify it here for the moment, because I think that pulling all of these video feeds in from every location will be something we want to do ongoingly. But to simplify it for just the moment, just to ask Jeff, if you had basically, just to keep it simple, multiple Zoom connections, into the, one from each location, including Madeline, how would you organize that in the cloud? So you just have those individual ones.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a machine in the cloud that's doing a receive. So then at that point, you full screen them, spotlight them, whichever way you set up your instances to work. And then you just take the NDI out of it and bring that into your vMix or your VisVector Plus or whatever to make the mix.
And so what we would want to do to replicate what we're doing now is have a connection for each person in Zoom, and then be able to do the mix minus in some kind of virtual box. Is that possible?
Yeah, the Sienna processing engine would be the way I would do that in a heartbeat. Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah. And what's the expense like for a Sienna process?
Somewhere between 15 to 20,000.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So,
but that's something that could be also leveraged as a service too, as a platform as a service also.
Yep.
So we'll just not have lunch on Saturday.
So
you're a cooking show.
So
you cannot skip lunch.
Is there any other? Is Sienna really the only one to do that kind of?
No,
audio
it's not.
processing?
It's not the only one. I mean, you could bring it in if it's NDI. You could actually use Reaper. There's other ways you could do it. It's just better if you're using NDI, but Reaper or Harrison Mixbus, both of those are on, or Adore, which is Harrison, the open source. Those are audio mixers online that you could run online. You can run in the cloud that can give you the capability to create mix minuses. And so to do that, absolutely possible within that infrastructure without bringing it down to the ground. In the Vector Plus, for instance, I could create 4 mix minuses out of it. I can't do them all, but it does have a master and then 3 auxes. It just depends on how important those mix minuses are. Now, what we've done also in the past, whenever we didn't really have to do a mix minus back to, for instance, like Zoom, for instance, I'm bringing those sources up, and then I don't need, that's the thing, is like out of those 5 sources of those cameras, I only need audio from 1. I don't need 4 of those to have audio, because they're just going to be video. And as long as they're in sync, then I could cut around all I want. I just need that one machine to have audio coming in.
I think the challenge for us is that we need comms for every single
run comms separately. And I've actually done that where the audio is coming from Unity.
Yeah, the challenge that we have with that is that it's a pretty big lift on with our current setup. It's not, but I admit, for me, we're very dogmatic about the user only has to open up Zoom. There's no other thought process, no other, like, when the user opens it up, there's no complexity on there. Like, we try to remove all the complexity on the far end, because anytime there's complexity, I have people, anytime you give them more than one door, they go out the wrong door.
Which user though? Which user?
The end user who's connected.
The end user is just seeing it. So that's Zoom.
No. But I mean, if I'm going to bring somebody into an event, I build the entire infrastructure around. They can open Zoom. They open Zoom, and that's all they open. And so I do the work on my end to make sure that all the audio comes back to them mixed together, so that that's why we do multiple connections. That's why we don't sidechain Unity, because I don't want to try to explain to them on how to use that or what to turn on and off. If Unity was now embedded into Zoom, that would be another thing. But right now, it is, I do that embedding in their return to make sure that all they have to do is open Zoom, because, for instance, what if I'm using, a good example is that what if I'm using a portal on their end? I can't sidechain Unity into that. So I can't, basically what happens is with the way we do it, because we're mixing that together, they can open it up on a phone, they can open it up on a portal, they can open it up on Alexa, whatever's there, they can open it up, and the show happens, for them, with comms and everything, and mix minuses and everything else that we need, by reducing that complexity. As soon as I add another dependency, I end up in a position where they, I can't actually talk to number 4 because they're on some other platform.
Well, then you either have to build out the infrastructure in the cloud, or co-locate it would be the other option too, which is effectively what you're doing anyway.
Co-locating.
Right?
That's what we're doing. What I'm trying to figure out is that how would my interest is doing exactly what I'm doing co-located in the cloud. So it would just be a matter of so you would build AWS instances, an instance for each one of these or whatever that is connecting to each person, and then you'd use the Sienna processing engine. So that's NDI from each one of those computers into Sienna, and then you're able to remap everything and build that connection there. Is that right?
Yep, that's exactly it. And honestly, as we're developing and working with Sienna really closely on their Sienna Unite, which is their contribution side, it just got a ton of new things, including true IFB and audio ducking. It's becoming a real production tool replacement. So if you can just give people a link or embed that iframe in a custom website of your own that you control their entry point, so they log in, they have their username is assigned to an input, done. And then that comes in as NDI with dedicated audio, with IFB back to them, with also the mix minuses created that you need necessarily all in your infrastructure.
Well, so the thing that might be simpler, or to explain how we do it anyway, is that what we're doing is we have a main room, and all the individuals that we need to have isolated connections are in a breakout room.
Right.
And so then we could have Sienna just attached to be getting the data from that. So those computers. So the main one is
exactly.
And then you have in each one of those are all static.
Yep.
So when it jumps, we move them into that breakout room, and at that point they're in it, so we don't have to build it for them. It's built for the system. So I think that would make what you're talking about simpler.
Either way, it's really simpler for the end user if they could just click a link, and whether it's a link to Zoom, which they have to open up an app, granted, in Zoom, or a link to a browser, which then is the same thing. They get the return back to them, and they also get their video to you, which is the important part we want out of it. But the big thing is you have their audio in their ears the right way. But you absolutely can do it. You just have to have the right tools in place to do the Zoom route in the cloud. And it's a lot more machines. It's going to cost you more to do it with a whole bunch of Zooms, because you're going to have to spin up more machines. And we're talking literally dollars, not even pennies to dollars, not really a lot of money. But the big cost is still going to be the glue, which is the Sienna processing engine at this time.
Right. No, absolutely. And how does that Sienna processing, are you able to show it to us? Do you have it?
Yeah, I always have it running. Absolutely.
I thought I didn't want to put you on the spot.
No worries.
He keeps it in his back pocket. Don't you know that?
Make sure you show that IP address again, Jeff.
It's on.
Or in the backseat of his big truck.
All right, there we go. All right, so, and there's my IP address, and good luck getting into it, John, because I've locked down the access from it, so it doesn't even matter. All right, so this is my contribution side. So this is what I was talking about when I'm using the Sienna Unite module. So this is bringing it in. Now, if I had multiple Zooms, I would probably go over it like I did in my router. This is the other part. So there's two products here. There's Sienna processing engine, and there's Sienna NDI router. The NDI router allows me to have a much larger, easy to patch interface. And so here's my Zoom window where I have up to 100 different Zoom machines, and then I'm able to bring any of those inputs to it. So this is my feedback to those Zoom machines. So this is how I'd route my return back to them. So in the same place, I have under my Mega Zoom here, this is where I was creating multiple inputs coming in and feeding out to those destinations. And as we're talking about the contribution output, this is where that magic happens that you're asking about. This is where the intercom comes in. Now, these are NDI sources on the side. These are sources, but those could be from Zooms, those could be from Unite, those could be from SRT feeds. It's NDI, it doesn't matter. So each one of those sources, those guests that are punched in from the router are coming in, and then I'm feeding into my intercom, and this is creating my mix minus. For those that don't 100% understand mix minus, because it is some voodoo magic, aux or audio in 1 hears 2 through 16 on its output. That's it. That's as simple as it could be. 2 hears 1, and then 3 through 16. And so then I have each one of those patched over into my embedders, which is then, now each one of those are custom audios, right? So 16 audios going into my embedders, which then go out to my links that are going out to the end user. So the link here, the Sienna Link Web, is what they see on their system, and that's that low latency, less than WebRTC, right under about 200 to 250 milliseconds return back to them. So that's their return video.
Does it also do 1080?
It is currently, I have it mine set to 720, but it can be boosted up if need be.
Mm-hmm. And what's the limit on the bit rate? It has 3 megs right now.
There is no limit. The limit is only your hardware. Mm-hmm. So the hardware on this machine, actually, I've got it choked down actually a little bit right now too. It's only 36 cores. I could do up to 96 cores. Right now, it's somewhere around right about 1 core per caller. A little bit less, and then you just add more machines if you need more callers. But I could easily handle 16 under either a 32 or the 64s, so that's not a problem. And then the link part though, I just want to be sure about that, is the Sienna Link Web is what I'm using in this model, but that could easily be an NDI return. And so that NDI return or NDI output or destination would be able to, as you see, that's actually what I did over here to feed Skypes. I had 14 Skypes in. I took instead of going into the Sienna Link Web, I went into an NDI output. That NDI output goes back into the Zoom,
Right.
the Zoom virtual camera input off of NDI Tools, free. That goes back into the Zoom, and there's my return back to them with
That's
that
great.
audio, however you want to use it, whether it's in comms or not. Sorry, I'm looking over here on the side. My monitor is really wide now. Okay, there we go.
That's great. Yeah. So you could, all of this could be the links there. And again, the thing that we're concerned about as far as, while it is a web browser, if we have to use, for instance, a Facebook, we're looking at using Facebook portals pretty heavily in our future. And because of the auto panning, for cooking, the auto panning is turned out to be useful. So
at that point, it's just a source. So it doesn't
Exactly.
matter. Yeah, it's just a source, and you just feed it back to what you need.
Yep, exactly. Let's jump into the questions.
Okay, the first one comes from Juan C. Robles in Mexico, and he says, what will be the requirements to participate in Mad in the Kitchen in the cloud, both on internet speed and computer specs?
It shouldn't change from what it is now. Like it's we recommend 10 megs up, and looking good on Zoom, so a web,
Well, let's decide which audience they're referring to. At what participation level are you asking that question?
Well, so to join Zoom,
we have three
we'd
different
still say-
audiences.
I know, but we would still say we have to look at like consumers, not the consumer connections. So we'd say 5 megs is not enough to be on the main show. You could probably jump into the Zoom and cook along at 5 megs up. But we would say 10 megs up is what we'd recommend, and 10 megs up, make sure no one else is using the house. We're a 1080p Zoom setting, so you need 6. You need 6 megs to do it properly. So I would say 10 megs minimum, for any Zoom connection for that. Now, if you are going to do if you're going to do any kind of multiple connection, then you need more. You need 15 or 20, as Jeff was kind of alluding to, so you'll need more. You'll need a higher connection, and those can be a little bit more challenging, although much easier now. We keep on seeing people calling Comcast and getting more for less, which is a crazy thing. So it's really worth calling Comcast right now. And then I will say that as we go into the folks that are going to end up on the show, typically they're going to have a multicam setup at their house. So they need to be able to have 2 or 3. 2 cameras is really going to be what we recommend minimum. One that's going to be them chopping, and one that is them talking into it. And they need to be able to cut back and forth, although we'd like to work towards a position where we can cut back and forth. And so that gets back into taking 2 connections, either what Jeff is talking about, where they're 2 direct connections into the cloud, or 2 connections to Zoom, or being able to control their switcher. All those things are things that we're kind of leaning towards. Go ahead, Sky.
So Jeff, as I'm doing the math here, if we've got 5 inputs coming from the main stage, then we've got 2 cameras coming in from the guest chef that's teaching us all, and then we've got 3 different pods out here of Zoom cooks that are participating. I lost the math. I lost track of my own math.
Okay, so you have to consider what's upload and what's download. So that's the big thing. So if you're using Zoom, you're doubling your bandwidth, because in every single source going out, that machine is expecting to see something coming back, right? So in most of our REMI type setups, what we're doing is we're sending up cameras, and we're barely touching the download, because all I need is like a multi-viewer coming back, and that's it. So in your situation, Sky, you would probably have 4 or 5 cameras going up, and then everything else is going to be coming down, which is irrelevant, because you probably have a gigabit by 30. Is that what you have?
It's the Comcast, so I think it's 6 down, 45 up.
Yeah, actually with 45 up, you're in pretty good shape, but I would still double it. Just get 2 machines, two modems.
And Bill, I'm going to let you keep running with this. I got to go catch my flight. All right, thanks.
Understood.
Thanks, Jeff, and I'll be listening. All right, thanks.
Fly safe.
All right, thanks.
Okay, George had his hand up, and then we're going to get to questions after. Go ahead. No, just moving your hand. All right, we're going to slip into questions then again. So the next one comes from Stephen Kimbrough, a friend on the panel often. Is there a network diagram for Mad in the Kitchen? Have you drawn anything out, Sky?
I would love one. Who is asking? And may they can. Oh, Steve. Oh,
Stephen
absolutely.
Kimbrough.
you and I, brother, are going to get on a keynote. And now that's the question is it pretty pictures or little black boxes? Because I used Chris Fenwick's pretty pictures and I got chastised by the true geeks in the room. So is it a religious question?
You do both. I mean, at an overview, see, I always think that discussions like this would benefit from just a cartoon chart almost, like at the beginning. So look, this is what we're doing. We got this lady cooking here. We got these people watching here. And then some people are just watching like this, and some people are, whatever it is.
That's why I asked the first question about the shape of the show, because I thought we were diving into the little details.
Agreed.
But it's that block diagram of what are we trying to get accomplished, and then it gets more and more complex, and you start crossing over lines and mix minuses, and
I call it the curse. I call it the curse of genius. A lot of times these conversations get super deep, super quick, and like everybody's like, I have no idea
as Alex has said before, your
ask.
basic ball handling is what makes the show live or die. It's not whether the comms work perfectly or less than perfectly. It's whether the program itself. So those main cameras, the main lesson, the main having the ingredients ready, that makes the show. And then the rest of this works on after that.
And historically, I think a circus is a best use possible concept to your question, Bill. Because we do have 3 rings, and I'm going to go try to find that thing because Hasmuk's got his hand up.
Right, 3 rings, but people see a cross, and I think that's live. Now you've got to let them decide which of the 3 rings they want to watch, and if they're watching ring 3, they could be not seeing what's going on in ring 1 or ring 2, so it's a little bit different. Hasmuk, please jump in.
Yeah, I almost think of this as we're trying to pivot what we've learned in office hours into this cooking kind of thing. So I see it more as not as a cook along, but a conversation in the kitchen.
Okay,
and
interesting.
The conversation in the kitchen is the main panelists. Madeline as the host, and then the guest cook. Then you have 3 other cooks who are also part of the panelists because they are cooking along. And then everybody else that's watching the show or participating in their own way with this cook along are the attendees. So that's really as simply as I can think about this as a structure.
Well, that's an interesting point because, for a lot of cooking shows, you get the feeling like if you don't successfully teach everybody how to cook this dish to their satisfaction, you've failed. In what you're articulating to me, as long as the show is entertaining and the community part gets done, it's still a successful show, even if there are issues. And in fact, we've seen a lot of shows where the issues are the most fun of the show. It's when it doesn't go particularly right, people learn how to handle those edge case things, and they enjoy that, I think, as much as they enjoy getting to a perfect souffle or whatever it is. You have your hand again up, so go ahead, Hasmuk.
Yeah, I think what Alex alluded to is the simplicity of the recipe. So we're not trying to make a fancy, high-level dish that's like a master chef piece. So it's not a masterclass piece.
You're not going to spend 15 minutes on carving the radishes into flowers before you put them on top of the dish.
Exactly. So it's more the questions and the conversation during the process that becomes more interesting, which is really where the real value is. And so that the byproduct is you've learned to understand how to cook that particular recipe. But you learn more around the recipe than the recipe itself.
I watched my wife, who's an excellent cook, learn her process. And it's sometimes that little off the corner lesson about how to, whether it's keeping your fingers curled when you chop or whatever. There's 1,000 lessons like that in cooking that help you get better, make you feel better about your ability to do it. Maybe more than getting the whole recipe done. Sky, you want to pop back in before I head back into questions? We're getting some questions.
I do want to get back into questions because I want to honor that. Yes, philosophically, again, it is a conversation. It's not a cooking show. It is a interactive community, and the food happens to be our experience or our excuse this time. And now Courtney's going to come in with a great voice.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Gee, thanks. No, I was just going to ask. I've only watched it as after the fact, not during the live show, but watched it on YouTube. During the show itself, are you running Mukana or a chat room so that the people that are attendees who aren't video participants in the show can comment or ask questions, and then the social media director person that Alex mentioned then can field those questions and pass them along?
Previously, we have been using YouTube because that was our previous experience and that was our distribution channel. And yes, she would scrape those chats. Previously on StreamYard, it has the ability of scraping those chats and dropping them in automatically. So yes, it has been discussed. And yes, I believe this week we will be using the Mukana tool for that exact purpose. And Marisa will be grabbing those and then helping focus them.
Lower thirds for everyone to see then.
But that's its own thing. I want
we're gonna hold on the lower thirds concept because again, we're still experimenting with just trying to get the show right. And to that Hasmuk's point, she almost I cannot say your wife's name to save my life. Mrs. Hasmuk said, I'm so sorry. That her personality is completely different to Madeline's, and she was a bit not intimidated. She's a very strong woman in her own right, but it's just a different energy. And so what we've also done with the recipe is also trying to level out and balance the energies. And the listening component is one thing that we're doing a much simpler recipe. We're not doing a thing that has to meditate for 3 days before you eat it. It's not meditate. Marinate.
Hey, I want to circle back just for a second, Sky, to that kind of thing. Is the social media person being a performer in a box on the show going to change their effectiveness as handling the social media aspects of the show? Can you be the great social media manager and appear at the same time? Or are those different things that require different?
She's in a separate room. She's managing things, and that we have a script, we have a run of show. And so there will be times that are in, again, a much more simplified run of show this time, not an articulate script.
So but your belief is that she can do both.
She will be, Marisa will be the person that Madeline can go, hey, Marisa, what are the Zoom people saying?
Okay.
And she throws to them. And that way that's what we kind of had a lot of energy happening last week because we had way too much show. But if you experience the Mad Marchness extravaganza, there was just a lot more show than we had packed into a 45-minute thing. And Liberty's going to bring in how to do it right.
Well, I was just trying to get clarification. So what you're saying is that she's essentially like a lot of these talent shows out there, that person off to the side that brings that engagement aspect in for the audience. And actually, I think it was on Sunday's talk, someone had just even mentioned more conversation. So she's probably that bridge to
we are listening to all of that. And we are desperately, again, with the two legs and our face into the tree, trying to pull out and see that we're in a forest. And yes, we're trying to.
Cool. Let's get to the questions. We're going to get too far behind if we don't. Rupert McCrae of Dallas, Texas says, any special considerations for running production software on server edition Windows operating systems in AWS, for example, compared to Windows desktop edition? Jeff, do you want to pop in on that, or is there anybody else?
The simple way to answer that is if you're running vMix, is you have to put Net 3.5 on for it to even install. So that's the beginning, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same. Of course, it's locked down a lot more, so the actual security settings and stuff like that do have to be worked around a little bit more, privacy settings, etc. But that's about it, really. It's pretty close.
Let's move on. Don Modine of Manchester, Connecticut says, what hardware is used to get return audio and video back into Zoom?
If we're talking cloud, then we're not using hardware to do that. We're using the virtual solutions, which is the NDI tools, which has both a scan converter and also has a what they call now, it used to be scan converter They changed the branding again, so it's like a scan converter. So it's it's scraping the screen and sending that out as an NDI source from that machine, that virtual machine. The other is to get it back into Zoom, is the audio and video is going in via the virtual input, which is the webcam input by NDI also.
And are there are parallel streams going? Somebody like Brian
Correct.
Anderson is doing the audio mixing in the cloud separate from what's happening on the video streams in the cloud.
It can be done. It can be done. It's not as easy as that, but it can be done. It's much more complex. We're for using Sienna, we have to, because it's an NDI audio. There's no NDI audio mixer except for those that are using the. If you're actually using VisVector Plus, as we are, we have a plugin that is converting it to VST. The VST plugin allows me to go into Harrison with NDI audio, and then I could use the tools in the Harrison mix bus to do a full mix, just like I'm sitting at a normal console at that point.
So does that mean for a show like this, you really need to have most of the players on the same platform that talks to itself, as opposed to multiple platforms?
No,
somehow
this
meeting in the end?
is there's nothing about the platform is irrelevant. If you have the right tool in the middle, the right piece of glue, then it's no problem. You could absolutely be using Sienna with SRT inputs, with the processing engine. You're using SRT inputs, LRT inputs from LiveView. I could mix and match whatever, Zooms, Skypes, whatever. If you've got a tin can and a string and it attached to the cloud, I could put it into it and I could use it. So it just depends.
And that's because Sienna's sitting in the middle, is that right?
That's right. That's the glue holding it all together.
Okay, that makes sense. Sky, go ahead.
So Jeffrey, I'm going to go get some twine from Harbor Freight, so I'll get you that good sound. The last week, again, it was kind of magical that was happening at 090 Studios. We were sending to Andy Lipnick, and he was doing the mixing down there, and JJ was also doing a lot of the other behind the scenes magic that's happening. So currently, I believe we are in the hardware solution, but that's why you're in the conversation.
Yes.
Because somehow we're going to move into
so the same
Guy
thing
Cochran's space.
process that they were doing. So they were basically, you're de-embedding the audio. Whether you're doing it in hardware or you're doing it in software, you're still doing the same thing. You're de-embedding the audio, stripping the audio out. It's being converted in the 090 Studios to Dante. Dante's going into the mixer. Then Andy is going in via his mixer and just remotely controlling that other mixer.
He was physically on site, but
he was on. Why?
Because he lives there. It was just easier, and we're just doing this for the first time.
You had to put pants on?
This is a challenge. We're all going to have to go shopping again and buy pants. It's just part of the world now.
Once again, not just TMI. And so, thank you, Jeff. So the question is that he wants to marry up his LQ something QL
QL1 is QL1
and be able to do it from home into wherever in the world that also has a QL1.
Absolutely possible to do that. Absolutely.
And
right
he's
now.
working
as long as you has a QL1, but that doesn't work to the cloud because there's no software version of a QL1. Now, there may be a guy that's putting a QL1 in a rack somewhere that would be able to tie in a QL1 to a QL1 at that point. And then that gives, and it's those real, quote, audio guys, we know the type, right? That they have to have the
Brian's a hero.
The exact same mixer, the exact same controls. They feel more comfortable. They feel like they can do a better job. That's what this application is for. And it's co-locating a QL1 in a rack attached to the internet, attached to all the other fun stuff that we're doing in the cloud.
Okay, let's go to Beju next, then Jesse Mills, and Courtney had his hand up at some point. I don't know if he's still in, but let's go to Beju first.
So Jeff, in continuation of this, is there a way to attach any hardware control interfaces to something like Harrison in the cloud right now? Any audio mixer in the cloud, or Scarhoy?
Absolutely.
Or
the Scarhoy or this guy is the Icon. Some people like it, some people don't. But this is the Icon Platform X. These are motorized sliders. I can assign all the buttons. I go with this into central control, and then from central control, I control anything I want to. This is a basic MIDI controller. You can also use the X Touch from Behringer. You could have almost the same functionality as far as writing faders and stuff like that. But guys, we're talking about a cooking show. this is like 2 channels, 3 channels of audio. We're not mixing a band here. So things like this will work.
This week.
Jesse Mills is up next, and then Courtney, and then we're going to go back to questions. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I've actually worked several times for Alex at the 090 studio and built his little Atmos room out there. And it's very loud because it's right next to the encoder space. So just another reason to work from home where you have a controlled, listening environment. And also, there's fewer points of failure potentially if you're doing everything in the cloud and it's kind of virtually routed, rather than using a hardware mixer and, potentially less energy usage and all that sort of jazz too.
So that's my story. Not that I want to wear pajama bottoms, but it's, anyway, we're moving on. Courtney, pop in and then we'll go back to questions.
Just one question. Has anyone looked at Fairlight? Does Fairlight have a network-based mixing solution that, because they have the neat control panel that interfaces over network, do they have a method, a software-based mixer that can take NDI inputs rather than hardware inputs?
Fairlight is in Fairlight / Blackmagic.
Yes.
You will never, and I'll say it, you will never see NDI and Blackmagic together in the same sentence.
New tech.
Never gonna happen.
Evil enemy number one.
That is from the top down. Yeah, they will not ever embrace something that somebody else made. They purposely went out of their way to do Tycho, which the other 3 people that did it failed too. So no, there's just absolutely no reason for them to do that. They're in a different market. There is a hole right now. There's 2, maybe 3 choices that I am looking at in this co-location situation. There's a huge hole of where the audio guys have just completely ignored the market. In the whole COVID, they're just like, what do we do? What do we do? Instead of thinking, oh, this is what we can do to help. So we see cloud production go into the cloud, but we see production go into the cloud, but they haven't figured out a way to get their audio engine, the DSPs and everything they're using, software based so they can use it in the cloud. And so Yamaha's missed the boat. Allen and Heath's missed the boat. Everybody's missed the boat. The only one that's thinking it is Calrec, and Lavo, which are both very high end properties. So and big money, real big money. Yeah.
Cool. Our next question actually comes from Mickey. Mickey, I hope you're having a great day off. You have not had very many of these over the course of time. So without taking the hardware's processing capability into account, can one technically, in quotes, run multiple shows at once on the Sienna processing engine? This may help spread out the acquisition cost of a Sienna solution. Jeff, what do you think?
Absolutely. We do it all the time. Yeah, absolutely. It's just a matter of spreading and watching your overall, in the cloud, I just keep turning the volume up. So I just go to the highest. Honestly, I do. I was like, when I go to show days, I don't ever want to have to consider, I went with a $2 an hour instead of a $3 an hour instance. It's $1. I'm going to turn it all the way up, whatever it is. And then I have no worries about, I don't have enough hardware ever. So
it just matters that you make sure to disconnect them properly at the end, right?
That does matter a little bit.
Okay. I'm learning some of the basics. John Fulton, looks like Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, says, can you describe the short version of how does Lyrics, the app, work? Anybody familiar with that on the panel? I'm not. Jeff, of course. Jeff.
Yeah, the Lyrics app is basically a capture app that is sending out SRT. I think it does RTMP too, but nobody uses that for me that I know of. But it's basically sending out our SRT to a server or a recipient that is on the far side. That's the biggest part of it. It's just a very simple app that works really well.
Nice. Tommy Chance is next with from St. Paul, Minnesota, with what does one need besides Mixbus to mix audio remotely? Well, we talked a little bit about that. Anybody?
Do you mean by Tommy? The question then is, do you mean hardware? So some type of hardware interface would be definitely preferable. But Mixbus, if you're doing it in the cloud, you have to be able to de-embed that audio or get that audio into something that the Mixbus can actually read. I use Mixbus on my desk. So I have Mixbus 32 on my desk, and I use Dante in and out. And so I have a full, not only a an actual digital audio workstation that I can record any of these channels with in Sweden, whatever I want to do, mix downs, but I also can mix it as a live mixer. I could use it as a live mixer too. So if you're using it with, okay, Tommy responded from NDI. So you have to have, as of right now, not available to the general public, you have to have the NDI VST plugin, the audio plugin, and that comes with your subscription with VisVector Plus, and it's not something that you can just hand out. So that until they either productize that to where it's a plugin you buy, a VST plugin you buy, or they just give it away for free, right? Then that will still be the big hang up to get it into the cloud infrastructure to be able to mix and take away that NDI audio and mix it and then send it back out. So I'm telling you now, everybody that's listening, if you can and you're interested at all, please email NewTek. I'll post a link in here, and just say, hey, we would really like to have that, because they need to hear
a trumpet voluntary and assemble the brigade.
I'll drop a link in Discord also of please let these people know, because they need to know. They need to know it's valuable.
There you go. Okay, David Brady of New York is up next with the
Sorry,
plan.
Beiju's got his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Beiju. If you want to get on the last one, go for it.
Yeah, I was looking at, there is a plugin available as an NDI embedder, de-embedder. Jeff, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, and it actually does. It works fairly well. Losis, is that right?
I think that's one. Yeah. That's the one, I think.
Yeah, it actually does work fairly well. But it's not as simple. Agreed. It's not as simple as just a VST plugin. They really did a good job developing that plugin for the Ardor and also the Harrison.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that because I think this converts it to ASIO, so it should show up to Mixbus, I think. So, or yes. vMix if need be. So you could actually get stuff in and out if you have to, or get out of vMix if you needed to into the system and then bring it back in.
And that's that workflow is why I don't really use it. It's just, it was a little funky. Yeah, but yeah, it could definitely help.
Okay, now we get to David, who's in New York, and he says the plant, and I'm assuming that means his place of work, started handing out access to AWS workspaces. Is there any way to use these instances in production workflows? And does somebody want to explain what AWS workspaces are for those who are listening? Go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, you can use them, but you very quickly will outpace what their capacity is. When you're doing real, I'm sorry, that's being condescending. When you're doing real production, but whenever you're running vMix or something that's graphics heavy and things like that, or any of the other mixing software like we use, then yeah, you'll be past their capacity, because it's a very large shared pool type of service. It's not something you control yourself. So you have the opportunity of somebody else taking over some of your availability and in the processing and all.
So it's a subset of the capabilities of a regular
simpler version.
Instance.
It's a simpler version of running your own thing. It's for those people that were not ready to jump in and build your own EC2 workspace. Is right. Basically a simpler way of getting into the AWS workflows, virtual machines, without building it all yourself.
Yeah, and Guy Cochran is showing some of the numbers involved in that. David, do you want to talk?
We're kind of using it in to replace VPNing and then RDPing to workstations on-prem. So it's kind of like a virtual workstation for us to hit in the cloud. Tried using it for a Zoom room. I didn't even have access to install it, so they're pretty locked down, but just curious if...
And Guy, do you want to talk about your chart at all? Is there anything you want to point out?
If you're doing some apps that are video editing type apps, you're going to want one with a graphics card in it, and by then you're all the way up to $735 or $22 a month, $175 an hour. You may as well just do your own instances. I mean, basically it's just admin control. These workspaces are meant to be populated across like 100 people, 1,000 people, and give them basic stuff like Excel or NetSuite or whatever access where you control it. Yeah. But for what we're doing, you're going to want the big bad boys, and then you're going to want, subnet access for NDI and things like that. So it just doesn't make sense to really use those as contribution machines.
I'll use that thing for email and Excel and leave it at that.
Okay. Steve Fisher of Pittsburgh is back with our next question. Jeff mentioned Sienna as a potential service. Is anyone doing that so that one might rent a tool on an as-needed basis? And if so, is there a link to that sort of thing? Jeff, go ahead.
Email me directly or send me if you've got a message. If you're on Discord, then DM me directly there. Yes, we do.
Pete in Seattle is next with, is anyone using Mac OS instances in AWS as clients instead of Windows devices? And I'm going to try to watch Jeff's face and make sure that he doesn't look too dyspeptic at the idea.
I do. I know I did. I did, and I paid for that Mac Mini I bought like that first month. So then the next month I bought another one, and then the next month I bought another one. So is it? It's honestly, and I love the guys at AWS, but they missed the price point on that substantially. It's way too expensive, and the requirement. It's not so much that the per hour; it's that required element that you have to have as a host. Also, it's just not. If you're very, very diligent, and you could turn it on for the day, like for comms, for instance, if you wanted to use a Unity server and move a license to it, turn it on that day or that hour before, if you want to really get tight, and then turn it off right away as you're done at the show, it could be a good tool. But I'm not going to run Keynote off of it. I'm not going to do any of that unless the client is really paying some really big dollars, because it's ridiculously expensive.
Okay. Marty Ardias of Silver Spring, Maryland, and our friend who's on the show occasionally, says, can a DSP-based purification be used in the cloud to mix audio and comms, such as Symmetrics, Axiom, and so forth? Some are even capable of processing video. Does anybody have experience in this little subset of the world?
I use Symmetrics, and I haven't seen anything that's software-based from them that you could just run in the cloud. That would be fun if we could. The closest thing to it is the Sienna processing engine, which is effectively using CPU to create those DSPs.
Okay. Pete in Seattle, and I may just check the time. Oh, we got 3 minutes to cover 2 questions, so we got a minute and a half for each. Wirecast is rarely mentioned or endorsed as the preferred solution for virtual production and streaming. vMix, maybe? Who has a Guy has an opinion? So
yeah, it's kind of grown long in the tooth. It's not as stable as vMix, where a lot of people have had crashes and kind of moved on. It's stable for certain aspects if you have the right machine, and you just one-trick pony it. It's good at just like basic cuts or basic encodings or basic overlays. And if you just let it to do that, it'll rock. But if the second that you start throwing multiple things at it, it runs out of steam pretty quick. And so I think a lot of people just moved on to vMix or Livestream Studio or something else that's more stable and can grow and utilize the newer processors and cloud stuff.
Okay, Beju and then George, and the last question really wasn't a question, so this is it. You guys take a little time here.
Yeah, basically I agree with Guy about it that Wirecast took too long to update. So a lot of people who are using it previously were not happy with the performance, so they moved on to vMix or Livestream Studio. Livestream Studio seems to be updating now a little bit, so hopefully they'll get a little more stable. So it's just like vMix is also the main thing with it is that they had a really nice free trial. So it was a good way to get people into the door to try the system out, which is I think what a lot of people fell into over the lockdown.
And George.
So I've been on Wirecast since version 1, and I've stuck with it for a long time. So I finally gave up on it. Once they're just not putting the work into it, and I just gave up on it. It's just not. I think when you have paying clients, you just can't use a product that's gonna fail at any given point.
You got a thumbs up from John Preto, so it appears you're not the only person who has that opinion. All right, well, that takes us to the top of the hour, basically. So thanks, everybody, for contributing. You know that tomorrow is Saturday. It's our big day. We'll start very early and do the normal show for an hour or two. The education panel comes in after that. We've got Nick Justitian with it's a long day with lots of fabulous content. So we hope we see you all tomorrow.
Cooking at 5.
Oh, that's right. And then cooking at 5 o'clock this evening. Thank you all
Haswick's
for
going to
coming.
be staying up all night waiting for us. He's a hero. And Ken
Excellent.
Jordan is also crazy. Are we doing a post show?
I don't know how to start one, so if someone is starting one, it's beyond me. So